Can teenagers really be put on contraceptives? For me, the answer is a direct no. And this isn't coming from ignorance. It's coming from hindsight, from watching patterns, from watching consequences unfold quietly years later when nobody is clapping anymore. We like to say teenagers know right from wrong, and yes, they do, to a certain extent. But knowing something is wrong doesn't mean you fully understand the weight of it. As a teenager, or even in your early 20s, you are curious. You want to explore. You want to feel. You want to try everything once, sometimes twice, just to say you did. That curiosity is natural. But natural doesn't always mean safe. This is also the age where peer pressure hits hardest, where wanting to belong can override wisdom. And when adults step in and say, let's just put them on contraceptives, what are we really saying? Are we protecting them? Or are we silently giving permission without guidance? Because protection without understanding is not protection at all. This is an opinion podcast. I'm not here to please everyone. I'm here to speak to the people who have looked back and said, if I had known better, I would have moved differently. Growing up, especially in an African context, contraceptives for teenagers were not even a conversation. Not because sex didn't exist, but because it was understood to be serious. Today, the conversation has shifted. The focus is, don't get pregnant. Don't get HIV. Don't get an STI. And while those are real risks, that's not the full story of sex. When you give a teenager contraceptives without deep guidance, what they hear is not caution, it's approval. It subtly communicates, you're going to do it anyway, so here. But nobody sits them down and asks, why are you having sex? With who? What are you trying to fill? What are you attaching yourself to emotionally? Sex is not just an act. It's a decision with layers: mental, emotional, spiritual. School teaches biology. Life teaches consequences. And the consequences rarely show up immediately. They show up later as confusion, attachment issues, numbness, regret, or distorted ideas of intimacy. Teenagers deserve more than prevention. They deserve understanding. In school, sex education is transactional. This is how pregnancy happens. This is how diseases spread. This is how to avoid both. But nobody talks about what happens after the act. Nobody talks about emotional bonding. Nobody talks about soul ties, whether you believe in them spiritually or psychologically. Nobody talks about how sex can blur judgment, especially when your identity is still forming. As a teenager, you don't yet know who you are, but you're already sharing your body with someone else. That matters. And I think we underestimate how deeply sex can shape a young person's view of love, worth, and connection. When sex becomes casual too early, intimacy loses meaning. Boundaries weaken. Confusion increases. So when we rush to contraceptives, we skip the most important step: education beyond fear. Not fear of pregnancy. Not fear of disease. But understanding of self. For me personally, sex is spiritual. And I know that word makes people uncomfortable. But uncomfortable doesn't mean untrue. You don't just exchange bodies, you exchange energy, influence, and pieces of yourself. That's why some relationships linger long after they end. That's why some people feel changed after certain experiences. Teenagers are still spiritually and emotionally forming. Introducing sex too early can interrupt that process. It can anchor them to experiences they don't yet have the tools to process. And no contraceptive protects the soul. You can prevent pregnancy, but you can't prevent emotional damage with a pill. You can't prevent attachment. You can't prevent regret. You can't prevent confusion. This is why, for teenagers, my answer remains no. Not because they're stupid, but because they're still becoming. Some people hear this conversation and think it's about control. It's not. Discipline is not oppression. Guidance is not punishment. Telling teenagers to wait is not denying them life, it's protecting their future selves. The self that will one day want clarity, stability, and healthy relationships. We've confused freedom with access. Access to sex. Access to adult decisions. But freedom without maturity is chaos. I'm not saying teenagers shouldn't know what sex is. They should. Deeply. Honestly. Holistically. But knowing does not mean doing. Wisdom is restraint, not because something feels good, but because timing matters. So can teenagers really be put on contraceptives? Legally, yes. Medically, yes. But morally, emotionally, spiritually, I say no. We should be raising young people who understand why something matters, not just how to avoid consequences. We owe them conversations, not shortcuts. Depth, not fear tactics. Wisdom, not convenience. Because the goal is not to raise teenagers who survive youth but adults who are whole. And sometimes, loving guidance means saying no before life forces them to learn the hard way.